My name is Emily Parker. The email arrived at 6:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because when my phone buzzed, I was lying on a white hospital bed in the special treatment wing of St. Vincent Hospital in Portland, preparing for a bone marrow transplant that could determine the rest of my life. Outside the window, the winter sky was still dark. The hospital hallway was so quiet that I could hear the distant rattle of a cart rolling somewhere far away. I thought it was going to be a message of encouragement from my husband. I was wrong. Emily, I have been thinking about this for a long time. I cannot continue this marriage anymore. I do not have the strength to spend years surrounded by hospitals, medications, and endless worries. My lawyer will contact you. I will not be coming to the hospital today. Please respect my decision. 12 years of marriage. 3 months after I was diagnosed with leukemia, and less than an hour before my bone marrow transplant, I read that email 5 times, then 6. After that, I put my phone down. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not get angry. There was only an icy feeling spreading down my spine, as if someone had thrown open a door in the middle of winter. A doctor once told me that there are moments when people hurt so deeply that they stop reacting altogether. Maybe that was one of those moments. Emily Parker was 34 years old. She was a literature teacher at a public high school in Portland. For years, her students had loved her for her kindness and patience. In Emily's classroom, even the most troubled children felt heard. No one knew that the woman who spent her life encouraging others was fighting the most dangerous battle of her own life. It had all started near the end of summer. Emily was constantly exhausted. Strange fevers appeared without warning. Bruises showed up on her skin for no reason at all. At first, she thought it was stress from work. Until the day her doctor asked her to sit down, the room felt brighter than it needed to be. The doctor looked at the file in front of him and spoke gently. "We have the test results. I am very sorry." In that moment, it felt as though the entire world slowed down. Every sound around her disappeared. Emily could hear nothing except the pounding of her own heart. Brandon Parker sat beside her that day. He held her hand. He cried. At least, Emily believed he cried. For the first 2 weeks after the diagnosis, Brandon became the perfect husband. He cooked meals. He drove her to appointments. He stayed up late reading medical articles. But then everything began to change, little by little. Quietly, like the tide slipping away from the shore. Business trips became more frequent. Dinners were canceled more often. Phone calls became shorter. The hugs became fewer. Until Emily realized that the man living under the same roof no longer seemed to be there at all. Brandon's mother was the first person to say what no one else dared to say. She came to visit one afternoon. Thinking Emily could not hear her, she spoke to her son in the kitchen. "You are still young. You cannot sacrifice your entire life for this." Emily heard every word, but she stayed silent, because sometimes the most painful truths are the ones that need no explanation. Over the following weeks, Brandon's family grew more distant. The phone calls disappeared. The words of encouragement disappeared. It was as though Emily's illness had turned her into a problem no one wanted to face. That morning, when the divorce email arrived, Emily finally understood. Brandon had not left her in a single day. He had left her a long time ago. The email was only the final step, a period placed at the end of a sentence that had been written months earlier. A nurse entered the room. She smiled gently. "It is time." Emily nodded. The bed began to move. The ceiling lights drifted slowly above her head. 1, 2, 3. Like the final frames of an old life coming to an end. No one in that hallway knew that the woman lying on that hospital bed had just lost a 12-year marriage. No one knew she had been abandoned on the most frightening day of her life. But what Emily did not know was that on another floor of the same hospital, a stranger had just completed a surgery of his own. And the meeting that seemed like pure coincidence was about to change everything. Not only Emily's future, but also a chain of family secrets that had been buried for decades and were finally about to come into the light. Emily Parker woke up in a hazy world of white lights and steady electronic beeps. For the first few seconds, she had no idea where she was. Her throat felt raw, her body felt as heavy as lead. Every breath carried a dull ache from deep inside her chest. Then the memories came rushing back. The bone marrow transplant, the hospital, the divorce email. Brandon, she closed her eyes. Only one day had passed, yet it felt as though an entire lifetime had fallen apart. On the other side of the room, she heard the faint sound of pages turning. The rhythm was steady, slow, as if someone was trying very hard not to disturb anyone else. Emily turned her head slightly. A man was sitting by the window. The morning sunlight rested on his shoulders. An old hardcover book sat in his hands. He wore a dark blue hospital gown. His hair was a little too long. His face looked tired, yet strangely calm. The moment he noticed that Emily was awake, he immediately set the book aside. Finally awake. I see. His voice was deep and warm. Not overly friendly. Not distant either. The kind of voice that sounded as if he were speaking to someone he had known for years. Emily tried to answer, but her throat hurt so badly that only a weak sound escaped her lips. The man stood up immediately. I'll get the nurse, don't try to talk. He pressed the call button and stepped back. He did not ask too many questions. He did not stare. He did not look at her with pity. That surprised Emily. For months, she had become far too familiar with pity. But this man was different. When the nurse left, the room became quiet again. A moment later, he spoke. I'm Nathan. Emily nodded. I'm Emily. Nice to meet you, Emily, even if the circumstances aren't exactly ideal. For the first time in days, Emily laughed. A small laugh, but a real one. The days that followed passed slowly. Her recovery proved more difficult than the doctors had expected. Her body reacted strongly to the treatment. Many nights, she couldn't sleep. There were moments when she wanted to give up completely. Yet somehow, Nathan always seemed to appear at exactly the right time. When she couldn't finish her dinner, he told a ridiculous story that made her laugh. When she worried about her test results, he changed the subject to books he loved. When she lay awake through the night, he sat by the window reading beneath the soft yellow light, as if his presence alone was enough to push back the loneliness. Nathan spoke very little about himself. Emily only knew that he was a few years older than she was. He had lived in many different places, and he traveled frequently for work. One day she asked what he did for a living. Nathan thought for a few seconds before answering. I teach. Sometimes. Emily laughed. That is the vaguest answer I have ever heard. Nathan shrugged. Some jobs take too long to explain. It's easier to keep it short. Emily assumed he was a university professor, or perhaps some kind of researcher. She did not ask any more questions. In a hospital, everyone carries stories they are not yet ready to tell. One rainy afternoon, Emily received a call from her lawyer. Brandon had officially filed for divorce. Not only that, he was demanding that their house be sold. The very house Emily had helped purchase years earlier using money inherited from her grandmother. After the call ended, Emily sat in silence. Her hands trembled. Nathan noticed. He did not ask what had happened. He simply placed a cup of hot tea on the table beside her bed. Then he said quietly, Never make important decisions on your worst days. Emily looked at him. Why? Because your worst days always lie to you. Those words stayed with her for a long time. Eventually, the day of her discharge arrived. Emily was cleared to return home and prepare for the next phase of treatment. That morning, Nathan was nowhere to be seen. A nurse told her he had been taken to imaging very early. Emily felt an unexpected sense of disappointment, even though they had only known each other for a few days. Before leaving the hospital, she placed a note on the table beside his bed. Thank you for helping me through the hardest days of my life. Emily. She believed that would be the last time they ever saw each other. But 3 weeks later, during her next round of treatment, a small package arrived at the apartment where she was staying. Inside was a novel. There was no sender's name, only a handwritten note. The chairs in the infusion room are terrible. This should help the hours pass a little faster. Emily smiled. What she did not know was that somewhere else in the city, people were calling Nathan Reed by a very different title, a title that would have seemed impossible to her. If she had known it, she never would have believed that the man who sat reading books by a hospital window was actually that person, and soon that secret was about to be revealed. That winter seemed to last longer than usual. Cold rain blanketed Portland for weeks without end. Emily Parker could barely recognize herself in the mirror anymore. Most of her hair was gone after months of treatment. Her face had grown noticeably thinner, but her eyes had changed. They were stronger now, calmer. After months of battling illness, what hurt Emily most was no longer the needles or the endless hours spent receiving treatment. It was the divorce waiting for her on the other side. Brandon had not changed his mind. If anything, he had become even more determined. Emily's lawyer kept receiving new demands from Brandon's legal team. He wanted the house sold. He wanted the assets divided in his favor. And eventually, he made a claim so shocking that even Emily's lawyer was stunned. Brandon argued that Emily was no longer capable of managing her own finances because of the effects of her medical treatment. When Emily heard those words, she remained silent. She had once believed she knew that man. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of building a life together. Yet in that moment, she realized she had never truly known him at all. The first hearing took place in early January. The atmosphere inside the courtroom felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Brandon arrived wearing an expensive suit, impeccably dressed, composed, as if he were the injured party. Emily sat across from him, quietly watching. It was the first time they had seen each other since the day he sent that email. Brandon did not look at her, not once, until his witness entered the room. Her name was Vanessa. Blonde hair, perfect makeup, confident to the point of arrogance. Vanessa introduced herself as a medical consultant who had interacted with Emily during her treatment. Then she began offering a series of observations. Emily frequently lost control of her emotions. Emily was psychologically unstable. Emily was incapable of making important financial decisions. Each statement landed like a carefully sharpened blade. Emily glanced toward her lawyer. The woman simply continued taking notes. No reaction, no interruption, which only seemed to make Vanessa more confident. When the testimony ended, Emily's lawyer finally rose to her feet. She walked calmly toward Vanessa. "I only have a few questions." Vanessa smiled. "Of course." The lawyer opened a file. "You claim that you closely monitored my client's condition throughout her treatment. That's correct. Do you have any personal relationship with Brandon Parker?" The smile disappeared from Vanessa's face instantly. The courtroom fell silent. Brandon lifted his head. For the first time that morning. Emily's lawyer continued. "We have hotel records, location data, phone records, and several other pieces of evidence. I think you should answer the question." Vanessa went pale. Emily felt as though the air in the room had stopped moving. A few seconds later, the truth came out. Vanessa was Brandon's secret mistress. Not for a few months. For nearly 2 years. The relationship had started long before Emily became sick. The business trips, the late nights, the secret phone calls. Everything suddenly made sense. Brandon lowered his head. The confidence he had walked in with was gone. But that was only the beginning. Emily's legal team continued presenting evidence. Their investigation revealed that Brandon had repeatedly transferred money from the home's maintenance fund into personal accounts. Some of the funds had disappeared entirely. The transactions had been carried out quietly over several years. Members of Brandon's family were involved as well. Layer after layer of secrets was peeled away. Lie after lie collapsed. Emily sat frozen, not because she was hurt, but because she was shocked. She had never imagined the betrayal ran that deep. The hearing paused shortly after lunch. Emily stepped into the hallway. She felt as though she had just survived a storm. Standing beside a large window, she watched the rain fall across the plaza outside. Then a familiar voice spoke behind her. "You were very strong today." Emily turned around. Her heart skipped a beat. Nathan, the man from the hospital, the man who had sent books, cards, and words of encouragement throughout the past several months. But today he looked completely different. A dark gray suit, a calm presence, confident. Nothing like the patient who had once sat by a hospital window reading a book. Emily laughed in disbelief. I'm starting to think you're not actually a teacher. Nathan smiled. I still teach. It's just not my only job. Emily looked at him. For the first time, she noticed how many people in the hallway seemed to know who he was. Lawyers, court employees. Even a judge passing by gave him a subtle nod of recognition. A strange feeling ran down her spine. Who exactly was this man? Nathan studied the confusion on her face before speaking quietly. I think it's finally time I told you a few truths. And Emily had no idea that what she was about to learn would be even more surprising than everything that had happened inside that courtroom that day. Emily Parker thought that hearing had been the end of the surprises. She was wrong. 3 days later, Nathan invited her to a small cafe near the banks of the Willamette River. Spring was beginning to arrive. The last traces of winter rain still clung to the rooftops across the city. Emily arrived 10 minutes early. The moment she stepped inside, she noticed something unusual. The waiter knew Nathan's name. The manager knew Nathan's name. Even a few customers passing by stopped to greet him. Not with casual friendliness, with respect. Nathan noticed the curious look on her face. He smiled softly. I'm guessing you have a lot of questions. Emily sat down. Only a few. Nathan was quiet for several seconds. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business newspaper. He placed it on the table. Emily looked down. There was a photograph on the front page. The man in the picture wore a dark suit. He was standing in front of a large conference audience. Beneath the photograph was a headline. Nathan Reed expands National Education Foundation with record-breaking donation. Emily looked at the photograph, then at Nathan, then back at the newspaper. It took her several seconds to process what she was seeing. The man sitting across from her, the man who had once occupied the hospital bed beside hers, the man who had sent books and handwritten notes, was Nathan Reed, founder of one of the largest educational foundations on the West Coast and a major shareholder in Reed Global Technology. Emily laughed, a helpless kind of laugh. So that's why everyone looks at you that way. Nathan shrugged. That's exactly why I don't like talking about my work. Things get strange very quickly. Emily remembered the first time she had met him in the hospital, the old book, the patient gown, the late-night conversations. There had not been a single sign that the man possessed a fortune worth billions of dollars. What surprised her most was not the money. It was the simplicity. Nathan was still Nathan. Nothing more. Nothing less. Over the following weeks, Emily's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The divorce case ended faster than expected. The financial evidence left Brandon with almost no defense. The judge ruled that the house belonged to Emily. All of her personal assets were fully restored. A separate investigation into the suspicious transactions was also launched. Brandon did not just lose the case. He lost his position at the real estate firm where he had worked for years. Major clients began walking away one after another. A reputation built over more than a decade disappeared within a matter of months. Vanessa did not fare any better. An internal investigation cost her her job. The future she and Brandon had once planned together quickly fell apart. Meanwhile, Emily returned to school. On her first day back, she stood outside her classroom door for a long time, nervous like a brand new teacher. When the door opened, the entire class stood up at once. Applause filled the room. One young student stepped forward. He handed her a small box decorated with colorful paper hearts. Inside were dozens of letters, messages of encouragement, drawings, short stories written by her students during the months she had been away. Emily burst into tears. This time she did not try to stop them. After everything she had endured, she finally understood that she had never truly been alone. One evening at the beginning of summer, Nathan took Emily somewhere special, a small piece of land overlooking Lake Tahoe. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the golden colors of the sunset. Nathan stood beside her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Emily laughed the moment she saw it. I guess we finally reached this part. Nathan smiled. I think we have. He opened the box. But what moved Emily was not the ring. It was what he said next. I never wanted to save you, because you never needed saving. I only wanted the chance to walk beside you for the rest of the journey. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes. In that moment, she remembered the worst morning of her life. The hospital bed. The divorce email. The feeling of being abandoned. If someone had told her that day that her future would look like this, she never would have believed them. 1 year later, they were married in the small garden behind Emily's mother's home in New Mexico. There were no reporters, no famous guests, only the people who truly loved them. Emily continued teaching. Nathan continued spending part of each year lecturing at a university. Their life together was more peaceful than anything Emily had ever imagined. What stayed in her mind after it was a simple truth. Her former husband had chosen to leave on the worst day of her life. A stranger had chosen to stay. Not because she was healthy. Not because she was successful. Not because she was perfect. But because he saw her worth during the days when she believed she had nothing left. Years later, every morning while making coffee in the small kitchen overlooking the lake, Emily still thought about that hospital hallway. She remembered the man sitting by the window with a book in his hands, and she understood something important. Sometimes the ending of a painful chapter is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is simply the way life opens the door to something better. Thank you for staying with us until the end of Emily's journey. What would you have done if you were in her position? Would you have forgiven Brandon, or would you have walked away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story of resilience, betrayal, unexpected kindness, and second chances. Remember, sometimes the people who leave make room for the people who truly belong in our lives. See you in the next story.